Someone who's been watching all of this is Darren Beattie. He's a former speechwriter for President Trump. He works now with Revolver News, the website. He says this is part of a familiar plan. In a recent piece, Revolver argued that Democratic operatives, including some who testified during the impeachment proceedings, are adopting the same tactics that U.S. intel agencies use to start so-called color revolutions in places like Ukraine. Darren Beattie joins us tonight to explain. Darren, thanks so much for coming on. So, for our viewers who are not familiar with the color revolutions in Eastern Europe, state as clearly as you can what you think is going on right now in this election. What's the end game for Democrats?
Yes, thank you for having me. Many have described the actions taken against Trump as a coup. And this is certainly correct, but it's a little bit general and vague. What's unfolding before our eyes is a very specific type of coup called the color revolution. It's a regime change model favored by many in our national security apparatus, particularly against Eastern European countries, to overthrow, target regimes that they don't like. One model, which is not the color revolution model, is purely sending a bunch of troops into a country and removing by military force a leader you don't like. That's like the Iraq model.
Right.
The color revolution model is a little bit more delicate and subtle. It has several characteristics, but the chief characteristics of it is a combination of an engineered contested elections scenario combined with massive mobilized protests, which they call, as a term of art, peaceful protests and acts of civil disobedience. If that sounds familiar, it gets even better. It's not only the same strategies and tactics used against Trump that's used against Eastern European dictators that our national security apparatus doesn't like. It's literally the same people who are color revolution professionals who have a long history of using these same tactics against foreign leaders they don't like to use against democratically elected President Donald Trump. It's the same people using the very same playbook. Now, I'd like to talk about one of the key figures in this operation, a nexus point not only between color revolutions overseas and the color revolution against Trump, but a nexus point between lawfare and mass mobilization and so-called peaceful protests. This is a man by the name of Norm Eisen. Norm Eisen is a key legal hatchet man, Democrat operative, former Obama ethics czar, believe it or not. And he is also a key architect of nearly every effort to censor, sue, impeach, and overthrow the president. He is the author of, in fact, a color revolution playbook, literally called the playbook. And one of the items he calls for in his playbook to overthrow regimes overseas he doesn't like is engineering election fraud scenarios, using election fraud to engineer mass protests to question the legitimacy of the target leader. Norm Eisen has a long and checkered history going all the way back to his days at Crew, which is a lawfare arm. He's been behind over 180 lawsuits against Trump. He authored 10 articles of impeachment before the president's phone call was even made. He was special counsel to the Democrats for the impeachment process. He was literally involved in every aspect of this color revolution against Trump. His latest act, and perhaps his greatest act coming up, is to use lawfare in order to overturn the 2020 election.
Normally, traditionally, House Counsel represents the interests of the entire legislative branch on any issue that might surface. However, Pelosi is setting up a legal activist agency within the House Counsel that will specifically, quotes, advocate, end quotes, for Democrat priorities. Right, this is advocacy, this is activism, this is lawfare.
I am holding in my hand the Muslim Brotherhood plan for the destruction of the United States, written 5/22/1991. The title of the plan is مذكرة تفسيرية للهدف الاستراتيجي العام للجماعة في أمريكا الشمالية. You all got that? There will be a quiz. It is titled the Muslim Brotherhood, an explanatory memorandum for the general strategic goal for the group, the Muslim Brotherhood in North America, written 5/22/1991. This plan was presented as evidence in the Holy Land Foundation trial, the largest terrorism trial ever in the history of the United States, where our government handed down, hello my best friend, where our government handed down 108 guilty verdicts for Muslim Americans and Muslim American organizations raising money to support terrorist organizations in the Middle East to the tune of millions. And I'm just going to read you a paragraph of this plan so it'll give you an idea of what I'm talking about. They talk about the settlement in the United States. Understanding the role of the Muslim Brother in North America. The process of settlement is a civilization jihadist process with all the word means. The Ikhwan, which is the Arabic word for brothers, must understand that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands and the hands of the believers so that it is eliminated and Allah's religion is made victorious over all other religions.
Negative on him. This was his opportunity to showcase his excellence and his successes throughout the last 4 years. Interesting, today, in the morning, you see all the criticisms of, the Hatch Act, saying that he shouldn't have been able to use the White House for a political campaign, which is all another example of them trying to use what we call lawfare, not warfare, but lawfare. They take it to the extreme. They did it with him with the impeachment. They did it with all of the security leaks, with all of the private phone calls that the leader of our nation should have been able to rely on not to be leaked. And they would go into every court every time he would make a move, which was constitutionally his prerogative as the president, from the travel ban to shutting down the border to all immigrants. That's the easiest one at the federal level, but we do it at the state level, we do it at the federal level. At the Southern District of New York, you see it constantly. It's an old play. They've been doing it since the Obama administration. They've been doing it a lot longer than that. But the notable one was when they wanted to get Obamacare passed. They went after Ted Stevens, the senator from Alaska. At the time, he was the longest-serving Republican senator in history. And they went after him on some trumped-up charges. They got a conviction, but they went after him during the campaign. So he ended up losing. After being in there forever, they went after him with lawfare. Completely disingenuous, completely unfair, but there is no fairness doctrine for the Democrats. They'll do whatever it takes to get power. I would say they would do whatever it takes to win, which might be admirable, but that's not what this is about. This is about getting power. Not even winning power, gaining power at any expense to the other side. That is un-American. Cy Vance is trying to get President Trump's tax returns from when he was a private citizen. Again, nasty, nasty people. The NRA is being sued, not civilly, not the heads of it. The NRA, which is a big political backer of, obviously, the Second Amendment, and because of that, most of the candidates that they back are Republicans, because the Republicans are pro-Constitution, pro-Second Amendment by default. They're going after Steve Bannon, same thing. Steve Bannon is a very effective political strategist. He has a big megaphone that people listen to because he's smart and he's successful. Another trumped-up lawsuit against him, a quadriplegic in his organization, going after him at exactly this time, right before the election. It's an old play. They're doing it. That's why they're suing everybody at every point. They've done it to such a level that they've got Kim Foxx in Chicago, Larry Krasner in Philadelphia. And this isn't just the politicians. This is the people that put the politicians in place. George Soros is the most notable one. The aforementioned Larry Krasner in Philadelphia received $1.5 million, $1.45 million for a district attorney's race. That's what he put into that race. And what do you see there? Letting all these criminals out, no bond. Kim Foxx, most famous case, in 2016, to win her initial race, Soros only had to put in $408,000. 2020, she had a crowded field. He's already put in $2 million to keep Fox in there. And you see what happens on the streets of Chicago every day. They have no bail. Just let the people through the revolving door. Doesn't matter who they hurt, who they kill. These people go back on the streets. You have to ask, why are they doing that? Why do they want mayhem in their cities? Stay tuned, folks. This is the Great Reset. Donald Trump is upsetting their reset. Donald Trump is trying to build back America. Ivanka Trump said it last night. Her dad is a builder. He builds things. Marion Bowser, the inept, some say corrupt mayor of Washington, D.C., made the police stand down, knowing that there were protesters outside of the Rose Garden, outside of the White House. When the distinguished guests left, a lot of old men, a lot of old women, walking down the street, the mobs jumped on top of them. Rand Paul, a sitting U.S. senator, and his wife, two not, physically imposing people, they're pretty small, they surrounded him. 150 people surrounded him and the police. These mobs have no regard for the police, and why should they? Marion Bowser had them stand down. There were hardly any police in the neighborhood, and that was purposeful. They knew that this was going to happen. They wanted this to happen. They wanted the protest to be there. During President Trump's speech, you could hear foghorns, those canister horns, drums beating, trying to interrupt. And what was so great about that is, because this is positivity over on this end, you heard those fireworks going off, and they didn't stop. Trump 2020 appears in the sky through the fireworks. Their heads must have exploded, those ignorant, mouth-breather protesters, those Antifa cowards. What is ironic, what is so classic Trump, is that he's turning the manipulation of the stock market to his advantage. When he ran in 2016, he pointed out, rightfully so, how the Federal Reserve was keeping interest rates unnaturally low, and that is causing the stock market to rally, and unemployment to be low. All of the male investment that goes into things that should not be invested in. Since he's been in office, he realizes that those establishment types are going to want their investments to continue to rise, so he's taking credit for all of the stock market gains. Part of his speech was him talking about how the stock market is at all-time highs. He built it once, making America great again, and that he's going to do it again after the CCP virus shut down. I don't agree with that. I think that it is all Fed, money printing, money boosting, asset purchases that have made the stock market flourish to the level that it is. It's unnatural. The earnings do not support this level of stock market, from the NASDAQ to the S&P, and definitely not the Dow. You're seeing the result in the price of gold and silver and all the other commodities, just starting to get their trajectory from the lower left to the upper right on the chart, as they say. They've forced people into the stock market. There's nowhere else to put it. You can't buy bonds because, net effect, we have what they call real negative interest rates. The 10-year bond is currently at 0.72. It was down in the 0.6s last week. That is unbelievable. What the investor is telling you is that they are willing to take 0.7% for 10 years to hold your money. After inflation is calculated in, you have a real negative interest rate. You're getting back less money than you put in. It's not a return on capital, it's a return of capital. You're better off buying gold under these conditions. These statistics do not make any sense. We've got businesses closed, restaurants not reopening, people out of work, no more federal additional unemployment benefits. That $600 went away. And yet Apple just surpassed $2 trillion in market cap. That is ridiculous. The Apple stores are closed, they've got old inventory, and they're coming out with new phones in a month or two. That is the direct result of funny money. The Great Reset is going to come fast and furious, and it's going to be painful. But for the time being, the only way we're going to be able to be saved is to get people like Donald J. Trump into the White House and slowly but surely get all of those establishment deep state actors out of the administrative state. It's happening. They are resigning, but there's too many of them, and it's going to take a long time. The question for the future is, who's going to come after Donald J. Trump in 2024? Ending on a positive note for the week, I can't think of one person that spoke at the Republican National Committee that was a mistake. All of them hit the ball out of the park. Donald Trump did a great job, spoke well, did the right thing, pardoned a few people, recognized a lot of good people, and pointed out how, from the Obama-Biden administration, how they failed, how they let the American people down, and how corrupt Joe Biden is. The response from the other side, they've got their paid, organized activists, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, the new iteration of the same organization, financed, well-financed. They're spoiled brats. They're children who don't get their way and feel justified in smashing your toys, the toys that you worked for. We have a two-tiered justice system. Kyle Rittenhouse in Kenosha, Wisconsin defends himself, is forced to shoot 2 people to death and shoot another man in his arm. Gruesome, but he had it coming. He was attacking Kyle. Kyle was there to help. Kyle gets arrested. All of these rioters, these people throwing bricks at people's heads, these people killing people from Portland, Seattle, all across the nation, nothing happens to them. Nothing happens to them. But one person defends himself trying to do the next right thing, and he is immediately charged. Immediately. As we mentioned yesterday, his right to defend himself in the court of law has been taken away from the funding perspective because his GoFundMe page was taken down immediately. One of the most encouraging aspects of what Donald Trump said at the Republican National Committee's convention over the past week is that the CNNs didn't even touch the fact-checking on the accusations that Trump laid down against Joe Biden and Joe Biden's 47 years. 47 years of corruption. They didn't touch it because they know they can't. They might on the side of their mouth say, oh yeah, those are lies. We're going to fact-check that. But at the end of the day, from Peter Schweizer's book to name one, all of it is there in black and white. They choose not to see it. They're not just bad journalists. They are bad people. They lie. They lie for a reason. They lie to deceive you. Thank you for listening.
The alarming truth about Lawfare. Back to Rules for Radicals, Saul Alinsky. His goal was to create a guide for future community organizers to use in uniting low-income communities or have-nots in order for them to gain social, political, legal, and economic power. That's the deception, isn't it? That's the candy-coated pill, the sugar-coated poison pill. It's mobilizing that giant base across the country for the Democratic vote, convincing them that they will have social, political, legal, and economic power, when in fact it's part of the plan of the subversion of this country by the socialist agenda. That's exactly how this works, and it's using lawfare to accomplish it. That rule allowing an expanded team of House lawyers to question anyone regardless of whether there is a Republican present to defend, protect the interests of the witness or target. This starts to get into shocking levels. I'm going to read right through it. Speaker Pelosi also removes any term limits on committee chairs. This allows greater political influence and power to their most senior members of the Democrat Party. Additionally, in the event Republicans develop immediate defensive plans to push back against the weaponization of these oversight committees, Pelosi gives her chair 60 days to make up the rules for their committees so they can deflect any defenses. On page 5, Pelosi removes rules banning headwear on the House floor. This rule change is intended to permit new Muslim members to wear Islamic-compliant hijab head coverings. Also on page 5, House Speaker Pelosi also removes the rule requiring a 3/5 majority vote to raise middle-class income taxes. This paves the way for Democrats to raise income taxes by a simple majority vote. Following the investigative plans for impeachment and in conjunction with all new powers granted to a massively expanded group of House lawyers with new and expanded power, page 7 has specific rules to benefit HPC Chairman Schiff. HPC Chairman Schiff can now autonomously demand and instruct depositions from anyone at any time for any reason, and the House Intel Committee does not need to consider any possible scheduling conflicts for any of the targets or have any Republican members present therein. I mean, this is why we're seeing, Republicans so outraged these days, and their faces are shaking during interviews. I mean, I would be too. This is just... Schiff was granted far more power than Nunes. Okay, page 9 is the beginning of a very interesting new power being granted to an expanded House of Office Legal Counsel. Explore all possible legal options for responding to any rulemaking by the United States Department of Agriculture. The Affordable Care Act, that's what this is. Okay, this is only the first part of this Pelosi rule. This part speaks to coordination. This is to defeat objection to Obamacare. So they're actually subverting the Supreme Court ruling in favor of Trump. This is lawfare. This is terrifying. This part speaks to coordination with Lawfare and similar activist groups outside government. The House will now defend Obamacare. Oh my goodness, and all other possible constructs with a legal team, regardless of what the DOJ might be doing on the same legal matter. I mean, it's in essence, a mini legislative DOJ branch that will fight the U.S. Department of Justice if needed. My goodness. 2 rules on page 10 are interesting. The first rule allows non-disclosure agreements that no longer have to pass through ethics reviews. This permits, so they can keep silent people unethically. This permits House members to force staff to sign NDAs that may or may not be ethically approved. The second rule on page 10 is Speaker Pelosi rebuking any demand that House members should be forced to pay for sexual harassment settlements. We wouldn't want that now, would we? By obfuscating the rule to overlay with the 1995 rules against any discrimination, essentially Pelosi removes any risk for members surrounding harassment. It's a nice head fake to create the appearance of something that doesn't actually technically exist. Very progressive approach. Page 11 creates a new House Committee for Climate Change. Don't forget climate change. Page 13 is the most interesting and ties back to the page Rule 9. Here, House Speaker Pelosi sets up an internal House division of lawyers paid with taxpayer funds to defend Obamacare against any adverse action. In essence, Pelosi is setting up her own legislative branch division of justice to fight against the executive branch U.S. Department of Justice if needed. Oh my goodness. The primary issue surrounds defending Obamacare from possible legal removal. However, it doesn't take a deep political thinker to see where this approach ends up.
Over the next several hours, you will all learn about, quote, lawfare, which has been defined as using law and legal institutions in place of military tactics, which sounds to the layperson like a logical way to proceed. Then you think about the thought-provoking tagline for the conference, as listed at the top of the brochure, quote, "Are America's enemies using law against us as a weapon of war," end of quote. Today, our expert panelists will explore the history and debate around the meaning of the term lawfare. They will look at lawfare in 3 different contexts. First, with respect to international war crime trials. Second, with respect to the Israeli-Palestine situation. And finally, with respect to America's struggle against terrorism. And They will ultimately consider how America and its allies should best respond to lawfare. This is exactly the kind of conference which we in our Frederick K. Cox International Law Center are delighted to host. Last year we hosted a conference titled After Guantanamo, which examined what to do with Guantanamo detainees and the officials accused of mistreating them. We've also held several important expert meetings, like the one that will take place tomorrow. For example, in 2008, we had a meeting about the International Criminal Court and the crime of aggression, which helped develop the compromise proposal that was adopted by 111 countries in Kampala this summer. This is all part of an ambitious international law program here, which has attained national and international recognition over the years. I encourage you to take a look at the Case Global brochure, which you'll find on the registration table, to learn about other ongoing international activities and projects. We could not do all this, of course, without resource support, to state the obvious, but that's what deans are supposed to do, so I've just done that. Our international law program is very fortunate to have been endowed by generous contributions from the Gund Foundation and the Bruce Klatsky Foundation, and we're especially grateful today to the Wolf Family Foundation, whose generous grants have made possible this conference and ones like it over the past 8 years. We also thank the organizations who are co-sponsoring this event: the American Society of International Law, the American branch of the International Law Association, the International Education Committee of the American Bar Association, the International Association of Penal Law, the Inamori International Center for Ethics and Excellence, and the Public International Law and Policy Group. Now, we have much more to do, or we have many more ambitions here at the Cox Center. As you might have seen if you've looked at the Case Global brochure and at the back of it, we are in the midst of a fundraising campaign to honor the legacy of Henry King. As many would know, he passed away last year after teaching at Case and directing our Canada-U.S. Law Institute for 30 years. Henry had been a Nuremberg prosecutor and honorary general counsel of Canada to Northeast Ohio, among other important positions. He was an institution builder, and the purpose of the campaign is to ensure that the institutions to which he dedicated himself will endure even after his loss. Those being the Canada-U.S. Law Conference, the Niagara Moot Court Competition, and the War Crimes Research Office. And we hope with your help they'll continue to thrive. If you can help us with this endeavor, we'd be very grateful to you. Now, as a final point, it should be obvious to everybody in the room, but an event like this doesn't occur unless you have an inspiration and a leader to make it happen. And we happen to have that here. His name is Michael Scharf, and it's my pleasure to turn the podium back to him. Michael.
Well, the topic of our conference today, lawfare, is literally ripped from the headlines. The ACLU just sued the United States government over the use of unmanned drones. And just yesterday, there were press reports of a 5th drone attack in the last 7 days in Pakistan and in Afghanistan. The first trial before the Al-Qaeda military commissions of Omar Khadr, the 15-year-old who is accused of lobbing a grenade at an American soldier in Afghanistan, is scheduled to recommence next month with the beginning of the prosecution's case. And the defense assertions that the trial violates the Geneva Conventions have been declared by many as a form of lawfare. Then last week, there were reports in the press suggesting that a lawfare campaign is being waged by Palestinians in advance of the new round of the Israeli-Palestinian peace talks. The newspaper reports that the Palestinians had been launching a series of lawsuits against Israeli officials and members of the military in courts throughout Europe in order to affect the peace process. The Obama administration, in turn, has decided to switch tracks in dealing with the country of Burma, from constructive engagement to sudden support for a UN investigation of atrocities, potentially leading to international prosecutions. At the same time, the Obama administration has created a new rule of law field force in Afghanistan that's being commanded by a friend of many of ours, Mark Martins. really bringing lawfare to the forefront of that conflict. So lawfare is everywhere, and it's timely, and it's important, and most of us are thinking, what in the world is it?
Stay dangerous.
So today,
They want to abolish ICE, and they dropped that on September 15th, 2020, this direct support PDX. So who is spreading the money and the fire for all of this, these occasions to try to stop the president? I saw one post on Twitter that said this election is between Donald J. Trump and George Soros. Look what happens on Fox News when Gingrich tries to talk about Soros.
Criminal and overwhelmingly elected with George Soros' money, and they're a major cause of the violence we're seeing because they keep putting the violent criminals back on the street.
I'm not sure we need to bring George Soros into this. I was going to say you get the last word, Speaker.
He paid for it. I mean, why can't we discuss the fact that millions
No,
of dollars
he
he
didn't.
spent?
I agree with Melissa. George Soros doesn't need to be a part of this conversation.
Okay. So it's verboten.
All right, we're good. Okay, we're going to move on.
Pretty obvious, right? What's happening with Fox? We're starting to see some of these shows. They're getting shut down, and we're finding out more and more that they're not allowed to bring up the name Soros. So at Carluska P, Carly said, coincidence, you see on the right here, Soros's prosecutorial power grab. You can see all the money resources used on that map. Washington has 680,000, Clark County 1.2 million, San Diego 1.5 million. Look at all that money he has poured out throughout America. And then you'll notice on the left, the Islamic terrorist network in America, all of those red states. Notice how it matches almost exactly with who Soros has prosecutorial power grab. It seems like he has his tentacles in everything. Quote from George Soros, the main obstacle to a stable and just world is the United States of America. He controls an awful lot as a puppet master, even more so.